Welcome to The Critique. Today we're looking at a video script from January 2026 by iNabber. This new Eugenia Cooney situation is absolutely disgusting.
It is a very, very heavy topic. And just reading through it, I mean, the writer's anger is just, it's right there. You can feel it.
You absolutely can. And I think that's a good place to start, actually. So there's this righteous indignation running through the whole thing. But the script's persuasive power is, I think, occasionally undermined by a reliance on repetitive, character-based insults rather than focusing on the implications of the behavior.
Right. So the name calling, I mean, I see that laid out here. But, I have to wonder about the audience. For this kind of topic, deep faking an at-risk person, isn't that anger and, using words like loser, pathetic, isn't that kind of justified? I mean, the audience might be expecting that level of heat.
The anger is 100% valid. And you're right, the audience expects heat. But, there's a difference between heat and light.
Okay.
The weakness here is that the writer just keeps coming back to these, high school level insults.
The brain rot one?
The brain rot, calling the creator a loser over and over. And while, again, the indignation is justified, it really shifts the tone from a serious cultural critique into something more like a drama alert rant.
And that risks pushing people away.
It does. It risks alienating a broader audience who might just see it as, a bully bullying another bully, instead of someone deconstructing a really dangerous technological trend.
So is the risk that by focusing on the creator's personality, you miss the actual mechanism of the harm?
That is exactly the risk, yes. When you lean on ad hominem attacks, the video becomes about the person, look at this sad guy, and not the phenomenon.
Right.
And that lets the viewer just dismiss the deepfaker as one bad apple, not a symptom of a much bigger systemic issue.
Okay. So what's the suggestion then?
The suggestion is to shift the focus from the person making the videos to the psychology and the impact of the videos themselves. So you replace the name calling with more analytical observations about the behavior.
Okay, so you elevate it. I mean, could the evidence also be used to, characterize the obsession itself?
Definitely. Let's look at a concrete example. The section about the McDonald's song, Golden Ark's Delights.
Right.
In the draft, the commentary just kind of ends with, it's quite frankly pathetic. Which, okay, it's true, but it's not an argument. It's a reaction.
It's an opinion.
It's an opinion. So a way to improve this would be to replace that phrase with something like, this content crosses the line from satire into targeted harassment. You see the difference?
Yeah, one's a personal judgment, the other is like a classification of the act. It gives the host more authority.
Exactly. It moves you from commentator to analyst.
And that earlier part where the script says, you have to be a complete and utter loser to spend your time making something like.
Right. I get what you're going for there. You want to express disgust, but we can make that stronger.
How?
Phrase it as something like, dedicating this much time to simulating a specific person's humiliation demonstrates a disturbing level of obsession.
Ooh, that's good.
It reframes the deepfaker not just as a loser, but as a predator. It changes the whole dynamic from some guy in a basement to a digital stalker. That's a much more potent frame for the essay.
That is way more powerful, yeah. It reminds me of the section on the 2025 fetish content.
The popsicles and hot dogs?
Yeah, and the script just calls the creator boring and sad.
Right. And calling a fetishist boring, it kind of misses the whole point of why that content exists. It minimizes the danger.
So what's the fix there?
The improvement is to analyze why that content gets past content moderation. For example, this content attempts to masquerade as fan art while serving a clearly fetishistic purpose. That explains the mechanism of the abuse instead of just insulting the abuse.
Right, it really does seem like the goal is to shift the script from internet drama to internet sociology.
Precisely. You want the audience to leave thinking not just that guy sucks, but this whole system is broke.
Okay, so building on that, on how the argument is built and how the audience feels it, I want to look at the timeline. The chronological presentation of the AI's evolution is a really strong foundation, but the narrative flow keeps getting interrupted by these tangential arguments that just dilute the building horror.
I see. So the argument is that the timeline itself, from the Eugenia's Echo song in late 2024 to the really graphic stuff in 2026, that part is compelling, but it keeps getting broken up by sidebars.
That's it, exactly. The script builds this really incredible escalation. You get the songs, then the partial AI, then the no-close videos. It's almost like a horror movie.
Yeah.
But that momentum is just shattered by this sudden detour into environmentalism,
polar bears and climate change, and then later it pivots to Jake Paul and Justine before you're even done with Eugenia's story.
So the weakness is that these interruptions are like speed bumps.
Totally. Just as the listener is starting to feel the horror of what's happening to this one specific person, Eugenia, the script pivots to carbon emissions. It feels really disjointed.
Right. The emotional work the audience is doing is suddenly put on pause to think about ice caps.
Yeah, so the suggestion here is to group the arguments by theme, not just a stream of consciousness reaction. Keep the focus entirely on the escalation of the harassment first. Then you can move to the systemic enablers later on.
I wonder if the writer thought that the environmental argument gave the whole piece more like moral weight, trying to say AI is bad for every possible reason.
Maybe.
But is that connection between the song and polar bears really established, or is that something that needs to be bolstered?
I don't think you can bolster it enough in this context to justify the interruption. It's just too distracting from the immediate human victim.
So what's the concrete example for a...
I would say cut or relocate that section entirely. The argument that these specific videos are responsible for the polar bears dying is just a huge leap. It pulls the viewer right out of the digital harassment story. If you absolutely have to keep it, move it to a broader cost section at the very, very end.
But even then, it just dilutes the urgency.
It really does.
And what about the tech influencers? The script jumps from Eugenia to Jake Paul, and then back to Eugenia.
That's the other big structural issue. You have to consolidate. Finish the entire analysis of the Love Eugenia Cooney channel. The no clothes videos, the 2026 clips, all of it, before you bring in Jake Paul, Justine, and Sora too.
So you'd bridge those sections in a different way?
Yes. You can use the specific detail about the channel labeling its videos as AI to segue into the discussion about YouTube's terms of service. That's a totally natural bridge.
Okay.
Jumping back and forth just makes the writer seem distracted. A solid block of narrative on Eugenia, followed by a solid block on the industry, would feel so much more authoritative.
It sounds like what we're trying to do is organize the viewer's outrage.
Exactly.
First be outraged for Eugenia, then be outraged at the system.
Yes. Don't ask them to be outraged at Jake Paul while they're still processing the deepfake images. It just splits their focus.
Speaking of the system, let's talk about the policy. The critique of YouTube and the platforms is really passionate, but it lacks specific technical grounding in the terms of service argument.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is the passion. I mean, the writer clearly wants change.
Yeah.
But the weakness is that the script just keeps saying YouTube isn't doing enough, and it mentions that the channel technically abides by the rules because of the AI disclaimer. But it glosses over the massive contradiction between YouTube's synthetic media policy and their harassment and bullying policy.
That's a great point. What are the limitations of just saying YouTube isn't doing enough?
The limitation is that it just sounds like generic outrage. It sounds like every other complaint video about YouTube. To make this actionable for the audience and for YouTube itself, you have to be specific.
Okay, so the suggestion is to deepen the analysis of why the content is staying up.
Exactly. Instead of just saying YouTube needs to change, you have to explicitly point out the loophole that's being exploited.
Can you give me a concrete example of how to phrase that?
Certainly. The script mentions the Cat 10 Barge article, and it notes that the video descriptions, like Eugenia asks if her plushes are adorable, hide the AI tag behind a show more click.
Right.
So you use that. Argue that labeling is not sufficient protection. Don't just say, I don't think this technology should exist. Say, the current UI design allows creators to bury the AI disclosure, meaning the platform's main safety tool is effectively invisible on mobile.
That is so much harder to argue again.
Right?
It shifts the blame from some vague algorithm to a specific design choice that the UI team made.
Correct. It makes the critique actionable. Someone at YouTube could actually read that and say, oh, we need to move the label above the fold.
And what about the fetish angle we talked about earlier?
Another loophole. For the hot dogs and popsicles, you have to frame this explicitly as a failure of sexual content detection systems, not just the failure of AI policy. The script says the videos are graphic and detailed. The critique should be, YouTube's automated systems are failing to flag this soft-core fetish content because it's being categorized as synthetic media rather than sexually suggestive content.
So that's the specific policy failure. The categorization itself is the shield.
It is. It gives the viewer the vocabulary to understand exactly how this channel is surviving.
Okay, that makes sense. The script also has a call to action to write your local lawmakers.
which feels a little standard.
It does feel generic. It's the kind of thing people just tune out.
So how do you improve that?
You tie it to the specific example of the 30 15-year-old girls in New Jersey that's mentioned later in the script. Instead of just write your lawmakers, say write to your representatives and cite the New Jersey high school case as a precedent for why we need federal protection against non-consensual deepfakes.
That gives them ammunition, not just homework.
Yes. It makes the call to action urgent, and it gives the audience a specific talking point. It's so much more effective.
It grounds the political action in the reality of the script. Okay, so moving on to the final big section, the tech influencer critique. The segment targeting Jake Paul and Justine is valid, but it suffers from a lack of a clear connection back to Eugenia Cooney.
This is a really crucial point. The script makes a strong case for, hating on Jake Paul, which is easy to do.
Right.
But the weakness is that the transition feels like a totally separate video. The script asks if Justine is not embarrassed, but it never clearly links her promotion of the tool to the specific misuse that's happening to Eugenia. It just feels like two different rants glued together.
Is there a risk that by just focusing on them selling out, you miss the deeper ethical problem?
Yes, that's exactly it. If you only focus on them doing it for money, it just becomes a critique of capitalism, which is fine, but it dilutes the critique of the technology. The argument shouldn't be promoting AI is bad because money. It should be promoting these tools without safeguards directly enables the harassment of people like Eugenia.
So building on that, what if we looked at it from the angle of consent?
That is the key word, consent. That's the thread that ties Jake Paul to Eugenia Cooney.
Okay.
When you talk about Jake Paul inviting fans to make Sora 2 videos, you have to link that directly to the loss of control over one's own likeness. You contrast Jake Paul inviting it and then getting mocked with Eugenia not consenting to it.
That highlights the consent gap.
Exactly. Jake Paul has the power to ask for it. Eugenia has no power to stop it. That distinction is so strong. It shows that the technology works differently for the powerful than it does for the vulnerable.
Yeah, Jake Paul can laugh it off because he invited the circus. Eugenia is being held captive by it. That contrast is where the real...
It is. And for Justine, the script kind of attacks her for being an OG creator who turned her back on real content. It feels a little nostalgic.
A bit gate... Yeah, it's not a very strong argument.
No. So a concrete improvement would be to focus on the normalization of the technology. Instead of asking if she's embarrassed, you argue something like, by presenting Sora 2 as a fun toy for wild videos, Justine provides the cover for platforms to ignore the darker use cases.
That connects it right back to the Love Eugenia Cooney channel. The fun toy becomes the weapon.
Exactly. The script mentions those darker reasons, like the nude edits of Sophie Rain. You have to say it explicitly. Influencers treating this as a game are what allow companies to ignore victims like Sophie and Eugenia.
That ties the whole script together.
It makes it one cohesive thesis, not just a collection of grievances. It makes Justine an accessory to the culture that hurts Eugenia, not just someone making a cringe video.
It really tightens the net. Instead of just firing shots at random targets, every single point reinforces the central theme of unchecked technological harassment.
That's the goal. We want every minute of the script to serve that main thesis. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I think these changes could really elevate this from a rant to a journalistic critique.
I agree. So let's recap the main actionable points for the listener.
Okay. First, the tone. The critique is that personal insults undermine your authority.
Right. So replace insults like loser and pathetic with psychological or behavioral analysis. It keeps your credibility and focuses the audience on the systemic issue, not the drama.
Second, structure. The critique is that the flow is broken by tangents.
Restructure the narrative. Finish the specific timeline of harassment against Eugenia before you branch out to the industry critiques. Don't let polar bears interrupt the story of a human victim.
Third, the policy argument. The critique is that general outrage isn't actionable.
Sharpen that terms of service argument. Focus on specific loophole, the hidden show more labels, the conflict between harassment and synthetic media policies, instead of just general anger.
And finally, the influencers. The critique was that the connection felt loose.
Make sure that tech influencers section ties directly back to the theme of non-consensual use. It's not about them being annoying. It's about them normalizing a tool that's being weaponized against the subject of your video.
This is such an important topic, and with a few tweaks, this script could be incredibly powerful. It has all the right raw materials. The research is there, the passion is there. It just needs that editorial polish to make it really land.
Absolutely. And honestly, the work being done just to document this timeline is so valuable. It just needs to be presented in a way that the skeptics can't ignore.
We would love to see where you take this. In Aver, please submit the revised script for a second look once you've made these adjustments. We really want to see this argument land with the authority it deserves. Thanks for listening to The Critique.